From the Performance Racing Network studios at Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Trouble, we got a car in the wall. 4, 5, 6 cars pile in. Jimmy Johnson now pulls to the bumper. He's going to try to make a move on Truex.
It's Racer's Odds. Now, here are your hosts, John Roberts, Jeff Hammond, and Jeff Caliandro.
And welcome once again, everybody, to Racer's Odds. We are here with you every race day to give you the information you need to find the sharp money where it is in NASCAR's top series. Want to welcome the viewers and listeners that are with us here on NASCAR.com. You can also catch the program on YouTube, SiriusXM, VEASAN, and PRN. This betcast, again, is easy to find. And right now, Jeff, got to check in with Jeff Caliandro here. And Jeff, we have heard some interesting news from some legislatures around the country right now, and the sports betting groundswell is continuing. There's a lot of moving and shaking going on.
Yeah, there certainly is, John, and I think we're going to continue to see this. You know, with legal wagering rapidly expanding across the country, I believe that NASCAR is really at the forefront of all major sports in terms of gaining a significantly larger footprint in the sports books. A couple of reasons why I feel so strongly about this is because many of the states that are taking the early steps to legalize wagering are definitely NASCAR hotbeds, whether they have a long tradition of fans in those states or they have tracks that host races. Either way, the states that are looking towards legalization are definitely, places where NASCAR has been very popular and will continue to be. Another reason is when you combine NASCAR's very rich analytic foundation, that is very attractive to the handicappers. And it's especially attractive to the newer handicappers that are really statistically based. And we're seeing that spread across the country as well, along with legalization.
All right, Jeff, we will definitely keep an eye on that for sure. Going to be very interesting over the next few weeks to see what comes out. Now, Jeff Hammond, one thing that was very interesting last week, we saw what we would call a definite surprise winner in Justin Haley at Daytona. Yes, the race was rain shortened, but Justin Haley became the third youngest winner in series history. And you know what? He represented the field. We talked about that last week.
Yes, we did.
The field was a 60-1 bet, and it included just a few drivers that weren't named with their own odds. So I think if you threw down some money on Justin Haley, you probably won a lot, but I'm not too sure how many people out there were really picking him.
Well, I don't think there were a lot of people picking, but a lot of people may have gone with the field just because that's one of the things that Jeff C. kept saying all along. He said, don't really like too much of these head-to-head matchups, and, groups are kind of worrying me too a little bit. But, really, if you want to have a little bit of loose money, you might want to look for a long shot, and that definitely would have been a long shot. Congratulations to him. It really kind of, I think, set the NASCAR world a little bit on its behind because I don't think anybody, as you said, we wound up picking that. But things will be different this weekend.
Absolutely. Hard to imagine, but we are now only 8 races to go before the cutoff, before we decide who's going to run for the championship. And this is the last 1.5-mile racetrack we will visit in the Kentucky Speedway, and that is where we find the majority of our races in the playoffs. But one thing we find in the majority recently is the fact that we have a lot of pole sitters winning races lately, and that's something that's on the mind of Martin Truex Jr.
As we figured this package out and as we've run it at all these tracks this year, I feel like things have changed so much. Early in the year, I feel like all the guys that ran good qualified bad. And now guys are figuring out ways to have enough speed in qualifying to start up front and be able to have good enough handling throughout the race to stay up there. And that's been a big challenge for us is how do we get both? We've had good handling cars at a lot of racetracks, but not a lot of speed. And we've been able to take advantage of good handling. So, I don't know. I think that in a perfect world, you'd want to start up front because you get a good pit stall and you don't have to worry about traffic and getting stuck, trying to fight track position throughout that first stage.
All right, so that's your current your defending series, or two-time defending series, or one-time defending series champion, and Martin Truex Jr. He's going to go off Jeff from the 8th position tonight. He starts 8th. He is a plus 700 wager right now. What do you think of Martin's chances? He's good on this type of racetrack.
Let me think here. He has won the last 2 races here at Kentucky.
Yeah.
You got to remember, we only come to Kentucky once during the entire season, so this will be the final mile and a half, but it is probably one of the hardest mile and a halves that we go to. But going back to Martin Truex Jr., last year sat on the pole, won stage one, won stage two, won the race. So this is kind of like one of his favorite racetracks, I might add. And I think tonight he's going to be pretty tough to beat. He's only one of three, former winners here. I mean, we got to realize this track's not been around. We haven't run it that many years. But with that being said, you've only got Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, and Kyle Busch that are former winners that are in the field tonight. Matt Kenseth is not racing tonight, but he's the only other winner we have. So it's really kind of wide open for a lot of people to step up and change that. And we got, a surprise today. Well, I think Daniel Suarez is sitting on the pole. So if you believe what Martin just got through saying in his soundbite, you might want to all of a sudden run out and maybe put a little bit of money on Daniel Suarez and not only get for winning the pole, but maybe this is an indicator how good that SHR car is, and could he be in line now to maybe win his first NASCAR Cup race?
So history tells us, Jeff, that if you look at what has happened at this racetrack, chances are, more often than not, the winner has come from the front row, from the first two starting positions. Now, the first two drivers that are in those positions, they have never won at Kentucky, neither of them. Daniel Suarez has never run a Cup race. Eric Almirola finds himself on the front row as well.
Yeah, when you look at it, 5 of the 8 Kentucky winners have come from the first row, including the last 3 in a row. Both drivers, in Eric Almirola and Daniel Suarez, starting on the front row, are both 18-1. Those are very tall odds for analytics that point toward a front row winner.
So did you guys know, and I must admit I did not realize this until actually looking at the statistics, Martin Truex Jr. has won every stage there's ever been at Kentucky, because there's only been 2 races under the stage format, and he has won every stage and each race. Jeff, does that put him in any kind of different company now because of how much things have changed?
No, it's a remarkable stat. He also owns this stat. I want to say, I'd have to go back and look at my records, but Truex is no stranger to winning stages. And we see that again at Kentucky. One of the interesting things is that you look in the 8 races, Chevy has not won a race at Kentucky yet. And you start to pare it down. You see Truex, you see Keselowski's been so strong. And of course, Kyle Busch. It's awfully difficult to look outside of those 3.
So, Hammond, what do you think?
Well, what we need to take a look at here is that, yes, he is. All the statistics are spot on. But this is not the same Kentucky that we're used to seeing, folks, because I'll try to explain that to you, because the track itself has aged a little bit. We haven't been here this year. We only run here once a year. So if you get a good setup in the past, you can understand how you can come back and kind of repeat and hang on to that kind of an advantage. You show up this time, the racetrack's a lot rougher. They got PJ1 on it. For whatever reason, there's like some patches been done to it. On top of that, we've got a different aero combination. I don't like using the word package. I'm sorry, but it's a different aero combination. So when you think about 1 and 2 being 17 degrees of banking, which makes you, if you get through there really well, you carry a lot of speed down the back straightaway. When you get down to 3 and 4, it's only got 14 degrees of banking. Somebody says, well, what's the big deal on 3 degrees? You watch these cars tonight, folks, they get incredibly unstable when you get off down there. And a lot of teams, I think, were kind of dependent on this PJ1 to give them some more grip. And we've seen in these previous races, whether it be the trucks or the Xfinity, all of a sudden you get to turn 3, getting there a little bit hot. Next thing you know, you lose the back end, you lose the front end, you lose your race car, and then you lose your temper. But the thing is also, Goodyear's got a new grippier right side tire. So we got a little bit of variables. Right side tires should wear a little bit more. Racetrack's still going to be pretty fast by the time it cools off tonight. So other than that, everybody's going to be going crazy wild, because other 2 races are any indication of what we're going to see tonight. You better batten down basically the coffee table, because it's getting ready to get up and vibrate.
Yeah. Now, whether you're watching it on TV or listening to it on the radio, you're going to have to get used to a couple terms you're going to hear a lot tonight. It's either track bite, VHT, or PJ1. It's a sticky substance, very close, very similar to good old-fashioned Coca-Cola, soda pop. It's been used for years in many different disciplines of auto racing, especially the NHRA, to give those big, powerful engines and tires a chance to grip the racetrack and get going so they can go up to 325 miles an hour or whatever it is. And that's something that driver Paul Menard is looking closely at tonight to see how it affects the race.
Yeah, it's we're definitely using it in 3 and 4. 1 and 2, we're we're right on the edge of being wide open and having to lift a little bit in 1 and 2. So we haven't moved up there yet. We'll definitely be up there in the race once you get in dirty air, try to make passes. You'll be running all over the compound in 1 and 2, and definitely 3 and 4. I think is the preferred groove up there. So I actually see it as it's going to be a benefit in 1 and 2 in the race to give you an option to pass. Where I think 3 and 4 it's going to be harder to pass because.
Yeah, it's always difficult to pass these days. We hear that all the time, but this is going to help a little bit with this grip, Jeff. And what do you think? What effect will it have on the race? There's some fans we've heard of don't really like the fact of putting a sticky substance down on the race, but I think sometimes a racetrack rather. Sometimes drivers like it, sometimes they don't. What effect do you think it's going to have?
Well, I'm going to point out one thing real quick. Whether you like it or not, it's the same for everybody. It's not like all of a sudden, I get to pick to run here or there. I can go where I want to. I'm the race car driver, whether they've got it on the track or not. So you have to adapt to it, whatever the conditions are. It'd be no different if all of a sudden, they change this race from a night race to a day race and the racetrack gets hot and slick and everybody starts complaining about that. Let's go back to the night race, because it just all depends how you handle it and how you mentally approach any racetrack. So let's leave the PJ1 out of it. It's part of the game tonight. You're going to have to deal with it. You and your crew chief are going to have to communicate. You got to work on your car. You got to realize it's going to change, because as the rubber goes down, the longer we go, the more the cars move around. Track conditions are going to be a really, really big premium. And at the same time, where you wind up on the racetrack at the end of these stages is going to be very critical also. We've seen early in the week, starting up front, track position has always, and will always be number one, no matter where you go to race at. Tonight will be no different.
Yeah, and Jeff C., judging on what Jeff Hammond said, I just believe it wouldn't have much of an effect on betting lines at all because everybody's dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, it probably doesn't affect betting lines so much, but what I think it really affects is the ability to handicap. And as you mentioned, it's one more variable, and variables have been the tag word for the 2019 season. I think you have to stop and consider, since we've seen winners come from basically the front, especially within the top 10 at Kentucky, does the PJ1 allow for drivers that are starting deeper in the field, maybe your Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson or even Chase Elliott? Will they be able to move through the field, at an increased level when compared, with the PJ1 compared to when they didn't have PJ1?
So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a look for you at 3 different types of wagers you can make on NASCAR's Top Series. First of all, flat out, who's going to win the race? What are the odds there? Where are the bargains and value picks? And who are the favorites there? We'll also look at head-to-head matchups where there can be a tremendous amount of value, and also groups as well. We'll also get into a little bit at this point with 8 races to go before the playoff cutoff. We'll take a look at what the odds are for certain drivers to go on and win the championship. A lot more to come on this edition of Racers Odds.
Jake was in big trouble with the IRS. He owed how much?
$92,000.
Ouch. The IRS left no room for Jake to breathe.
They put a lien on my house, took all the money out of my bank account, took money out of my paychecks. So it was a nightmare.
He needed help fast.
I figured that all these companies were the same until I called Federal Tax Management. You could just tell they knew what they were talking about. Right then and there, I felt like I had some hope.
Stop the liens, levies, and garnishments fast and qualify for one of several special IRS programs that could reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. So, how'd it go for Jake?
They did what they said they would do. They came through for me. I ended up saving an unbelievable amount. I was so jazzed. I was extremely happy.
If you owe more than $10,000 in back taxes, take Jake's advice.
Give Federal Tax Management a phone call. If they help me, they can help anybody.
Call the Federal Tax Management Hotline now. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381.
As states have begun the legalization of sports gambling, the entire sports landscape is changing.
I think we're going to see more and more states fall in line, and this gets legalized across probably all 50 states.
And so is the way you listen to Sports Talk Radio. I'm Brent Musburger, and on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, we follow the money and the games. It's sports talk you can bet on. So check out VSiN. Odds are you're going to like what you hear on Channel 204 and streaming on your phone or at home on SiriusXM connected devices and speakers.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome once again to Racers Odds. This betcast is available on several different outlets. We want to welcome those with us on NASCAR.com. And also now, Jeff, we want to get out to Mr. Pat Patterson, who is at the racetrack right now. Pat, how's the weather? How's the feel out there? What's going on at the track?
Well, Johnny, it's great to be with you, and it's hot. Kentucky, man, July. It's hot, and, of course, the fans are right now filing into Kentucky Speedway. 20th anniversary of this racetrack. Racetrack itself is well treated with TJ1, that traction substance, and also has been gone over by the tire dragon. That's where they drag the tires around the racetrack, get a lot of rubber in. We've had 2 races already. Tyler Ankrum won the NASCAR Gander Outdoors Truck Series race on Thursday night. Then last night it was a battle between 2 cars, Cole Custer and Christopher Bell. They split daylight, nighttime, and it was Custer at night who was the fastest overall. But in the garage, everybody's worried about the big transition tonight from daytime to nighttime. Who can hit it right? This was an impound race, which means the cars qualified. They were put in that garage over there. And Jeff Hammond, you know, it's a big deal to kind of figure out how to set my car up to be good when the moon is out, not when the sun's out.
You got that right for sure. I mean, that's the thing. It's always a challenge right now. Whenever you have a daylight to dark deal, you've got to have an aggressive crew chief who understands what way the direction the track's going in. Otherwise, you'll be behind for the entire race. And tonight's race is going to be pretty fast.
Yeah, it really, really is, Jeff. And, when you go through the garage and you try to pick the fast cars, it's really hard to tell who to pick. And I know I'm trying to help people figure out who to maybe put the smart money on tonight. But I got a feeling that it's the same situation we've had the last few weeks where the cars that you're going to need to beat are going to be those Penske cars, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney. And then you've got the Toyotas, which may not have qualified that well, but have had a lock on this place and are very, very good here. So I think between those 2 camps, once again, they're going to be the strength of the field. However, keep this in mind. Cole Custer won the race last night. He races for Stewart-Haas Racing. The guy that's on the pole tonight, Daniel Suarez, Stewart-Haas Racing. Where's Kevin Harvick? Right up there in the front. In fact, all of the Stewart-Haas cars are in the top 7 in terms of qualifying. The question is, are they set for when the moon comes out? That's going to be the question. You can get out here and lead all the laps you want to in the first 2 stages, but we all know that final stage tonight, that's when your car's got to be hooked up. That's when the racetrack's going to get tremendously cooler than it is when we start this race. So it's going to be a guessing game. Every one of those drivers has got to get up on the wheels. It's going to be 135, 140 degrees in that race car. You better be ready to go tonight. Veterans are going to have a little bit of advantage, and I hope all of them have been sitting outside all day long and not in the air conditioning.
Yeah, and Pat, some of the crew chiefs earlier this week, several said, look, at this point of the season, we simply do not care about points. We don't care about stages. There's a lot of drivers out there whose only way, realistically right now, to get into the playoffs is for a win. Do you feel the sense of urgency? I mean, sometimes you can tell by the look on the face of some of these drivers and crew chiefs that there is that sense of urgency.
Yeah, well, there absolutely is, Johnny. And Ryan Newman said it best in the media center. Look, if we want to be in the playoffs, we have to win. There's no more chances of this or that or the other, big wrecks on the racetrack. You got to go into the race thinking we've got to score victory if we want to stay in this thing. Now, if you're Jimmy Johnson back there just hovering around that cut line, you need to be really careful. Would not surprise me tonight to see William Byron come out of the box early, keep up in that top 10, and maybe be a factor towards the end of the race. He's another guy that's trying to, get himself a solid position in the playoffs. One thing we know for sure in this, anybody outside of that top 16 comes in here and gets the victory, pushes everybody back a little bit more. So the ones that are back there in that point position where they're behind, they know tonight there's only one mission: go out here and win at Kentucky.
Jeff?
No, he's exactly right. You've got to go ahead and put your work gloves on tonight because it's going to be a tough race, and we know how challenging it is. And I like what you're saying, Pat, when you really kind of like point out the fact that you got some guys that know they've got to win, but you've also got guys like Jimmy Johnson. He's got a little bit of a cushion right at the moment. Seems like the team's running well. He's in pretty decent starting position. You got to race smart at that point in time. You can't go out there and be totally out of control, but you got that big three up at the front. They've already got wins here. They love this racetrack. They've got nothing to lose. They're going to be dangerous. Then you got the other group like Daniel Suarez, who's on the pole. They need to be out of control. This could really make for a really great race tonight and set a lot of drama in play early on, but even before the end of stage one, about what to expect. I'm not going to be one bit surprised if we don't see some of these cars early on go down early as far as getting a lap down, and that'll make things even more crazier.
Well, you hate to say it like this, Jeff, but the smart money is going to stay on a Toyota or Ford. Chevrolet's never won here.
No, you're right.
So
you're bucking the odds, man. You're bucking the odds. That's it.
Exactly
you're bucking the
right.
odds.
Exactly right. And a lot of those Chevrolet drivers are the ones that desperately need it. Kyle Larson back there in the 42 car, got to get a win to make things work for him.
No, you're exactly right about that. I mean, the numbers don't lie, do they, John?
They
I mean,
do
when you really get down to it, it
Yeah.
tells you what you need to do tonight. And you've already said it. We've only got 8 races to go. And this is going to make things even more interesting because we've got some races coming up like at Bristol, at Michigan, going back to Pocono. It's going to get real intriguing. And if you don't get it done early, well, you got about 8 races to go.
Yeah,
it's going to
time is
get even
running
tougher.
out.
It's going to get really bit tougher and tougher.
Yeah, and big thanks to Pat Patterson out there, man. I know it's just scorching hot in Kentucky, but Jeff, it always is. It's that time of year. The summertime is when the action heats up on the racetrack, and the temperatures go up as well. And sometimes some drivers absolutely just shine when it comes to summertime.
They do. I mean, they're ready for it. And the thing is, we always like to laugh about it, but it's not really a funny cliche, but this is the truth. This is where we separate the men from the boys. I mean, it's time to find out who are the ones who really want to make this deal work and who don't. And Jeff C., you know good and well from your end of it, when you sit there and you start looking at your notes and look at the trends and everything that's available to the gamblers and the bettors and everybody involved, you know that everybody here at this point in the year, they know what they've got to do. And that makes, I think, things even better because there's nobody safetying up. Everybody's got to go all in.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jeff. This time of the year always brings an extra layer of, I guess really calculated thinking about situations and where everybody is. And from that point, you almost try to get into their mind and their team and figure out, are they going to run for stage points? Are they going to run for a win? And you absolutely have to take that into account when you handicap a race, without question.
So, Jeff, when you look at just the simple odds to win the race right now, it shouldn't surprise anybody that Kyle Busch plus 350, Kevin Harvick plus 600, Martin Truex Jr. plus 700. They were the big three last year at this time. Kevin Harvick couldn't be any more hungry for a win right now. And then when you look at Brad Keselowski at plus 700 as well, he's the only guy that has won 3 times at this racetrack. We haven't been here very many times, 8 to be exact. This is the 9th time around. And so, therefore, when we look at this, there's not too much history to fall back on.
No, there really isn't. If you take a look at Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, and Martin Truex Jr., they are the only three drivers to finish on the lead lap in every race at Kentucky. So they've been awfully strong with a lot of consistency there. You have Brad Keselowski as a three-time winner. So you've got a lot of strength up top, and frankly, they deserve to be the odds-on favorites. But I almost wonder if we should be looking more at comparable races as opposed to track history at Kentucky, because we have an entirely new rules package, and we've seen the cars operate so much differently this season so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always divide the winners or the odds to win the race up into three categories. There's your favorites, there's your value picks, and then there's your real long shots. Jeff, do you see any real value in a driver? I mean, some of the guys that are starting close to the front that are far back, Clint Boyer at 20-1, Ryan Blaney 18-1, our pole sitter 18-1 at Daniel Suarez. What do you think? Is there good value in that little pack?
Well, I think it really depends on your perspective. If you're going to play this from an analytic standpoint, I think you've got to look at Almirola, Suarez, Kurt Busch, all of them starting very up high, 18-1 for Almirola and Suarez, and 20-1 for Kurt Busch. So there definitely is value from that perspective. But if you're thinking that the cream will rise to the top, then you got to go back up to your favorites.
Exactly. Sometimes that is where the sharp money is on those favorites, because we've only had three drivers right now that have won that are still active in the sport. That, of course, being Kyle Busch with 2 victories, Brad Keselowski with 3, and Martin Truex Jr. also with 2, but that just so happens to be for Martin the last 2 races. Now, coming up next, we're going to hear from Martin Truex to see if past performance for him has anything to do with what might happen in the future. We're also going to dive headlong into head-to-head matchups and see where the value is there. Stay with us. We'll be back with much more Racers Odds.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
We like to think of it as the multivitamin of digestive health.
It's the only product to combine all natural ingredients known for the digestive health properties into a single patented product. Praxid also comes in easy-to-carry packs. Praxid relieves, restores, and maintains a healthy digestive system. Praxid is available here for only $39.95. Shipping and handling is free, and your money back is guaranteed.
To take advantage of this special radio offer, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735. Again, 1-800-829-5735.
You didn't think he'd put down the microphone completely, did you?
Greetings from Las Vegas.
Well, neither did we. Hear legendary broadcaster Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
I never told my wife how much fun I had when I was staying here for about 3 weeks. Oh, it's terrible living in a casino. It was the greatest 3 weeks of my life. This is the only book in town that's open 24 hours.
There you go.
Make that bet around 4 o'clock in the morning.
You don't need a dress code. Pajamas are good.
Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
We're back with more Racers Odds.
And welcome back once again, everybody, with the Racers Odds. I'm John Roberts. Jeff Hammond is our championship crew chief, our NASCAR analyst, and also our wagering analyst is Jeff Coyandro, our NASCAR visionary, who will be telling you what he sees when it comes to putting together the sharp bets, the smart money, where it is in NASCAR's top series. Now, this is the last 1.5-mile track we will be on before the playoffs start. But once we get to the playoffs, that's where the majority of the races will be held. So Hammond, we may see something tonight that gives us a glimpse into the future as maybe who one of our championship favorites might be.
Well, I think you're going to get an opportunity to draw a conclusion who's getting stronger and who's getting weaker, especially, if the Joe Gibbs cars step up as they have done in years past and get to victory lane, whether it's Kyle Busch or Martin Truex Jr. or even somebody like Denny Hamlin or Eric Jones are able to get there. But the key thing is, how will this competition go between Toyota and Ford tonight? We've got definitely an indicator that the Fords came here to Kentucky this weekend to make a statement. They've already done it in the Xfinity Series. Cole Custer going to victory lane last night. Daniel Suarez up on that front row taking the pole position along with his teammate Eric Almirola. So these guys are indicating that we're learning something. We're not quitting. We're finding speed in our cars. Now if they can just translate that into consistency and make sure they get to the end and close the deal out, no matter who it is. I think it's going to be interesting. And can Chevrolet upset these two other manufacturers and score their first win here at Kentucky?
Yeah, so as of right now, it's a friendly rivalry between teammates Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch. They're definitely finding themselves at the top of the heap, and they also find themselves in our first head-to-head matchup in our group number 1 of matchups. There we got Martin Truex Jr. plus 160, Kyle Busch at minus 90. Jeff Coyandro, what again does that mean? If I like Kyle Busch and I throw $10 down on Kyle Busch, he finishes ahead of Martin Truex Jr. What happens to those $10?
John, so if you were to take Kyle Busch, he's an overwhelming favorite in this matchup at minus 190. That means that if you were to take $10, you would win back $5.25. Now, of course, you would get your initial $10 that you wagered back as well, but you would only have a profit of $5.25 on a $10 bet. And those are very, very long odds to lay down, especially in a head-to-head matchup against somebody as so strong as Martin Truex Jr.
Yeah, and Jeff, you told us at the start of the program today that there are a lot of things that are different this time around. Even though Martin Truex Jr. has won every stage there's ever been run at Kentucky, he still feels like he might not be the odds-on favorite. Okay. Got no Martin right there. We'll get back to Martin in just a second. But, of course, Martin Truex, again, past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results, Jeff, especially with the changes that have happened, the track surface, the track age, the PJ1, the track bite. He might be right on and saying, hey, man, what happened in the past doesn't matter that much.
No, and I think that's what, Jeff was saying earlier, when you take a look and start breaking everything down, there are no guarantees.
Definitely a lot on our mind coming here.
The problem we run into, again, folks, is the fact that this new aero combination is totally different. We come to Kentucky once a year. It has aged another year on the racetrack. They've come with a lot of other variables. Operative word, variable, new tire, right side softer, should wear a little bit more. PJ1 down on the racetrack is going to let the guys move around a little bit more, make the racetrack wider, should make better for passing. And plus the aero package itself. How will it respond here on a racetrack that's got, I keep saying it, more banking in 1 and 2, less in 3 and 4, but yet you're carrying more speed into the flatter part of the racetrack off of 1 and 2. So it makes it more challenging and more, I guess you might say, we know what to expect, but how bad will that expectation turn out to be in the long run? How many cars are going to get loose? How many cars are going to totally lose it and wreck? We've seen a lot of wrecks in that one end of the racetrack a lot this week.
Yep. So, guys, let's check back in with Martin Truex Jr.
Definitely a lot on our mind coming here just because of, this year and what it's been all about. It's so different. I think, think back to the last couple of years, and we've really been able to kind of come in here with the same strategy, mindset, set up, kind of, look for the same things throughout the weekend. now with the new cars this year and PJ1 on the track, all those things, different tires. I mean, it's quite a bit different. So we didn't have a great day of practice, but hopefully we'll make some good changes for the race. And it's tough these days when you come with a new package, you don't get a lot of practice. So we were off quite a bit to start and playing a little bit of catch up right now.
All right, so he'll still start in the top 10, and he's got to be one of the favorites. But let's now, guys, bring back up our first group of matchups and go back to Jeff Coyandro. We see that Martin Truex is involved in several of them, and also, again, a little bit of an underdog there to Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, he sure is, John. He's actually a sizable underdog to both Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick. And for somebody who's been as strong as he has been at Kentucky, those are awfully enticing odds. I think they have to make you pause to really look at them and consider a bet.
Jeff Hammond, what do you think? When you look at those matchups, anything stick out to you?
I'm a little bit like I'm sitting here a little bit mystified because the group that we're talking about here, being former champions, still together, Cole Pearn and Martin Truex Jr., to be at a deficit at a place where they've won the last two races and coming off races where they have been extremely strong. I guess I'd ask my colleague here, Jeff, are we looking at a sucker bet here? I mean, is there something that I'm missing? Because it seems like this would be, in my layman's terms, a simple, man, I need to put some money on these guys because I think that, he's got a legitimate shot for going 3 in a row.
Yeah, it definitely piques your interest, Jeff. I think part of it, when you really break down why the odds are the way they are, is because we know how strong Truex has been. As a matter of fact, going into the matchup between Truex and Kyle Busch, before the weekend began, Truex was a favorite at about minus 130. Well, now he's a plus 160 underdog. And this is not really related to starting position because they're starting very closely to one another. This really has to do with the fact that Truex did not have a great practice sessions. He did not run 10-lap averages in either practice session. And Kyle Busch was pretty fast. So that's the reason why these odds have flip-flopped so much and now favor Kyle Busch very heavily.
Jeff, the Kyle Busch-Joey Logano matchup seems fairly interesting. They're starting very close to one another. Kyle Busch starts 10th. Joey Logano starts 11th. So they'll be rolling off basically in the same position. But then again, it just seems like that might be shy. It just might be a little bit wide of a margin.
Yeah, it seems that way to me as well, John. You've got Logano, who's starting 11th. He was the second best in happy hour for total lap average, and he ran 56 total laps. So we got a very good sample size of how fast he is over the long run. And to even take it one step further, when you look at Kyle Busch, minus 160 versus Brad Keselowski at plus 140. You've got Keselowski, who's been so fast, as we've discussed, and seeing him at a big underdog like that really does pique your interest.
Yeah, and Brad Keselowski is a 3-time winner at this racetrack. So certainly you say there's different courses for different horses. Brad Keselowski seems to have this one figured out, Hammond, but also at the same time, though, just like Martin Truex warned us, he said we are coming back with something that's so different, so past performance might get thrown out the window.
No, and he's telling you like it is. I mean, he's being honest with you. He understands that just because it worked last week doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work this week, so much less give a year's worth of aging on this racetrack and all the variables we keep talking about, bringing them back here. There's no guarantee that what you did a year ago, you'll be able to do again. And so I think what I'm seeing, and I was starting to think there was a trend here that maybe we were seeing a little bit of the odds makers looking at the manufacturer and giving them a little tip of the hat over the other big manufacturer. I'm talking about Toyota, at least a lot of these early head-to-head matchups. But even when you go head-to-head against each other inside the same manufacturer's group, especially like, when you see Brad Keselowski against his own teammate Joey Logano, but how about Kevin Harvick versus Brad Keselowski? I think there again, this is a Ford versus a Ford, and seeing how the odds makers look at those combinations compared to them going against Toyotas.
Okay, so we got your starting lineup scrolling at the bottom of the screen. And, Jeff, before we move on to our second group of matchups, though, that Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, teammates, but they're even money. The odds makers see those guys as pretty much dead. It was actually dead even. Is that a surprise at all?
Well, John, this is a great learning matchup for understanding why the odds are the way they are. When you look at this matchup, Keselowski has been faster than Logano all weekend. He's starting 7 spots higher than Logano in the race. The only difference is when you look at their last 4 comparable races, you've got a much better finishing position for Joey Logano between the two. And that's why when you look at them, you see them at both minus 110. You have a recency bias versus a bias of how they've done this weekend going into the race.
So both of you guys, before we leave this group number one of head-to-head matchups, if you got to take one, Jeff, who are you taking? Which one of these do you like the best?
I think if I had to take one, I would probably take a shot with Brad Keselowski over Kyle Busch at plus 140.
Jeff Hammond, you like one in particular?
I'm looking at the same matchup that he is right now, thinking that, if there may be an opportunity, that could be the easiest one.
All right, let's move on to our group number 2, get some other drivers involved here. Now, we've seen Chase Elliott visit Victory Lane once so far this season, so he's locked into the playoffs, and he finds himself plus 105. Kyle Larson minus 125. If there's anybody right now, Jeff, that's hungry for a win, it's got to be Kyle Larson.
Yeah, without question. I look at this matchup and then I sort of noted down that there was nothing to see here. And what I meant by that was that you've got Larson starting 19th, Elliott starting 20th. You've got Larson as 13th best over a 10-lap average in happy hour, and Chase Elliott 14th best. You've got Larson as a slight favorite. They look to be almost dead even going into the race, and I wouldn't want to lay a number, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with Elliott as an underdog there.
Yeah, and also don't know how comfortable we would really be here with Ryan Blaney and Alex Bowman, the way that one's laid out, Jeff.
Yeah, that's another one. I think when you look, neither driver made a 10-lap consecutive run during happy hour. And anytime you don't see teams make a long run, especially in happy hour, you always sort of have to question where they are going into the race.
Jeff Hammond, is Denny Hamlin getting enough respect here in these matchups that we look at?
You got to earn it first.
True.
and that's the way I look at that. I mean, even again, the ones they've got him lined up against, they pretty much are telling me that he can handle the Ryan Blaney situation, but he can't handle, the Alec Bowman situation. So it's, to me, the one I'm looking at, I think Jeff and I talked about this before we came on the air, the one that kind of like got my interest. I did a little bit of research back on it. Happens to be the Clint Boyer versus Jimmy Johnson, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that bet, and I'm looking at Jimmy, to take it, even though it's showing even money. And what's swaying me here, folks, just so everybody understands, Clint Boyer over the last 3 mile-and-a-half races that we have run has been 37th, 24th, and 5th, where Jimmy Johnson has been 4th, 8th, and 6th in the last 3 mile-and-a-half. And I've seen a resurgence in the 48 car. I've seen vast improvement in Hendrick Motorsports as a whole, and along with Chevrolet. So I don't have to win the race here. All I got to do is outrun Clint Boyer, and I think that we've got a chance to do that tonight.
Yeah, and guys, even there, I think there's equal amounts of hunger in the matchup between
starvation.
Clint Boyer.
It's starvation with Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, and Clint Boyer and Eric Jones, your last matchup in the group. I think that one's relatively intriguing as well because these two drivers are basically in the same boat right now, and therefore they find themselves basically even money.
Yeah, without question, when you look at this matchup, this is really a study of, again, line influence. And you look at track history here versus starting spot. You've got Clint Boyer, who only has one top 5 in his last 6 races at Kentucky, but Eric Jones has a 6th place finish and a 7th place finish in his 2 races at Kentucky. But they have a 14 position starting gap between the two drivers, with Boyer starting 7th and Jones starting 21st, but the line is neutral at minus 110. So you're looking at recency versus track history in starting position.
So same thing before we move on to another group, guys. Both of you, we want to put you on the spot here. Jeff, see if you got to take a matchup in this one, which one is the best out of this group in your eyes?
I think I have to agree with Hammond. I like Jimmy Johnson at -110. You know, you're looking at a driver in the comparable races who has an average finish of 8th in Jimmy Johnson. In those same comparable races, Clint Boyer has a finish of 25.3. So I like Jimmy Johnson at -110.
So need we ask, Mr. Hammond? I guess you feel the same way.
Keep preaching, Jeff. Keep preaching. I like what you're saying.
All right, so we got one more group of head-to-head matchups to take on here on Racers Odds. We're also going to get into some of the group bets where there can be some tremendous value along the way. We're counting down to race number 9 in the history of the Kentucky Speedway. You know what they say about the Bluegrass State? It's all about the horsepower there. We're going to find out tonight who's got the most. It is hot. There's grip on the racetrack. We're in for a great show, and we'll be back with much more Racers Odds in just a moment.
Jake was in big trouble with the IRS. He owed how much?
$92,000.
Ouch. The IRS left no room for Jake to breathe.
They put a lien on my house, took all the money out of my bank account, took money out of my paychecks. So it was a nightmare.
He needed help fast.
I figured that all these companies were the same until I called Federal Tax Management. You could just tell they knew what they were talking about. Right then and there, I felt like I had some hope.
Stop the liens, levies, and garnishments fast and qualify for one of several special IRS programs that could reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. So, how'd it go for Jake?
They did what they said they would do. They came through for me. I ended up saving an unbelievable amount. I was so jazzed. I was extremely happy.
If you owe more than $10,000 in back taxes, take Jake's advice.
Give Federal Tax Management a phone call. If they help me, they can help anybody.
Call the Federal Tax Management Hotline now. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381. 800-425-6381.
The Edge, only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
How you feeling? I'm feeling good. How you doing, bro? I'm feeling good, man. How you doing? How you doing?
The Edge, weekdays 3 p.m. Eastern.
The Raiders have made some sensational headlines. Well, I don't think you or I or anybody who seriously handicaps the NFL saying, yeah, the Raiders are going to be a playoff. I'm talking about public, more about public team, especially in Vegas with the excitement with that team going to be here in 2020.
Only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
And now more Racers Odds with John Roberts, Jeff Hammond, and Jeff Caliandro.
And welcome back, everyone, to Racers Odds. We were just talking about head-to-head matchups, and now we got one more group of head-to-head matchups to go through right here. It's our group number 3, and we're going to start out talking again, once again, about, let's see here. We are now down to, we got Clint Boyer and Kurt Busch. And you look at these guys. The first 4 head-to-head matchups we have on this list are all as equal money, and they're all 2 of the 4 involving Jimmy Johnson.
No, and we know that Jimmy's made a resurgence, but let's kind of break it down to the fact that can he actually take on some of these guys head-to-head with what's in store for tonight and what's up for grabs, and basically come out on top of them. That's, to me, is what makes this interesting.
And Jeff Caliandro, I believe throughout the course of us doing Racers Odds and also throughout the course of this year, when it comes to head-to-head matchups this year, Jimmy Johnson has been a pretty safe bet. He has finished ahead of a lot of the different drivers that he's been matched up against.
Yeah, he's had a fairly decent season. It's gotten better in recent weeks. So I think Johnson is definitely on the upswing, and I like him. I don't like him as much in these two matchups against Eric Jones and against Kurt Busch. I think Eric Jones could be very sneaky this week. But one of the matchups that I do like is Kurt Busch at -110 over Clint Boyer. Kurt Busch has the best head-to-head record so far this season, at 20-11, and that's for any driver who's competed in more than 25 head-to-head matchups so far this season.
Interesting, Hammond, heading into this season when we talked about Kurt Busch, there was a definite agenda. He was going over there to that race team supposedly to add a lot to it. I'm sure he has added a lot of expertise and veteran savvy. They were hoping that it would raise the performance of the other team, the 42 team with Kyle Larson. That hasn't quite happened yet, but nonetheless, Kurt Busch hasn't really surprised us with finishing where he has. What surprises me personally is that he has not visited victory lane yet.
No, and I think, he missed maybe an opportunity at Bristol. We got Bristol coming up pretty soon. But when you look at somebody like Kurt Busch and what he's been able to do, he's had 29 top fives on mile-and-a-half tracks, and 83 top tens throughout his career. He's just a solid racer, and whenever you think about going up against somebody, he brings that experience, he brings that composure. And a lot of people say, you got to be kidding me, Hammond. He's got composure. Since he's joined Chip Ganassi Racing, Matt McCall, they have done a great job of complementing one another, and they have been able to be very consistent. So I like the fact that, when you look at his numbers against a lot of people, you really got to dissect it down pretty far to know that, he is probably going to be a pretty safe bet. On the other hand, you take somebody like Eric Jones, when you look at him going up against Clint Boyer, or Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson. He may be outclassing Jimmy here. I mean, that's the thing is when you look at what he's done lately, again, looking at recent races, he's had a 7th, a 40th, but a 3rd and a 4th on mile-and-a-half so far this year. So Eric Jones has got speed no matter where he starts in the field. And here's that variable that comes into play. And Jeff C. pointed us out earlier. It might wind up, and so did Pat Patterson, it may wind up this PJ1, may widen the racetrack out and make it to where even though you're starting deep in the field, you're able to make some passes and work your way up toward the front and get yourself back in contention. And they've always had a very, very fast pit crew over at Joe Gibbs Racing. So there's another variable that could, kind of like put you, get you some positions on pit road during the course of the race. So I think he is a very much a sneaky driver, and he's got a few aces up his sleeve, you might say.
Yeah. Well, without question, Jeff, one of the things when I look at Eric Jones, I do agree. I think he's going to be strong. I think he's going to race well. But when you look at the matchup between Kurt Busch and Eric Jones, they're both at -110. But Kurt Busch has a 17-spot starting advantage over Eric Jones. Now, at some tracks that we wouldn't even consider that. But at Kentucky, if we can see, Kurt Busch get out to a clean run and get some clean air, Jones may have a tough time making up that ground throughout the course of the race.
Intriguing matchup here, Jeff. William Byron and Eric Almirola. These are two drivers recently, even taking away just Daytona. Take that out of the whole equation. Two drivers that are trending really in opposite directions lately.
Yeah, they are. When you look at Byron, he was faster in both practices over Eric Almirola. He qualified 12th, and he'll be going up against Almirola, who qualified 2nd. So again, you see a line that you can kind of learn from. You can see why one is shaded as the underdog and one's the favorite, having to do with where they're starting, and Byron just being marginally faster than Almirola during practice.
Jeff, how about Austin Dillon, Daniel Suarez? This matchup is kind of interesting. There's our pole sitter, and there's a real long shot in Austin Dillon to win the race. But what do you make of that head-to-head matchup and the disparity there in the numbers?
You know what I'd call that? I call that the Grand Canyon.
The Grand Canyon. How big that disparity is there.
Yeah, it sure is. That's the first thing that has to catch your eye. As a rule, I don't think I even look at taking a favorite that's maybe more than -160 at the most. So 250 is way out of the range. But you look at Austin Dillon, he's starting 9th, but he's averaged -14 spots in terms of starting to finish in the last 4 comparable races. When you look at Suarez, you would have to lay $25 just to win 10. It only pays 40 cents on the dollar to win that matchup, and that's just not enough.
Yeah, no real value there, I guess. But guys, let's put you back on the spot now. Starting with you, Jeff. When you do look at the matchups number 3, these groups, is there one in particular that you would go for, or do you want to stay away from all of them?
No, I think the matchup that I like out of this group is Kurt Busch at -110 over Clint Boyer. I think you've got to go with the fact that Busch has been far better recency. He has a better track record than Boyer at Kentucky. He's been a better head-to-head driver. He's been faster this weekend. I just like the things that stack up for Kurt Busch in this matchup.
Hammond, what do you like?
The same numbers bearing me out the first time when I talked about, Clint Boyer. He's just not been on his game this year when it comes to mile and halves. And I think he's going to have to show me something before I would be willing to take a chance on him. So yeah, I'm Kurt Busch has been steady Eddie. I'm going to go steady Eddie.
Probably a wise move right there. And so often, Jeff, when we hear odds makers from and handicappers from other sports, they talk about the consistency of a particular team against the spread. I think if you look right here, sometimes you mentioned Jimmy Johnson was one of the good drivers. You mentioned Kurt Busch was one of the best drivers so far this year against other drivers, how they did in their matchups. Are there other guys out there that you look at as just simply being good bets within matchups?
Well, I think when you have matchups, you look at drivers who are good and drivers who are bad. So some of the good drivers so far this season have been Kurt Busch, Ryan Blaney. Interestingly, Daniel Suarez is 7-1 in his head-to-head matchups, and Alex Bowman is 6-0. They just haven't had a lot of matchups outside of the super speedways to really hang your hat on. Consequently, you look at a driver like Kyle Larson, and even though he performed well last week, he is 9-36 in his head-to-head wagers, and he is down 27.5 units. So if you had bet $100 against Kyle Larson in every matchup so far this season, you'd have $2,750.
Wow. Interesting.
Jeff, I got one question for you. When you see something like this, I mean, what allows Kyle Larson to wind up being one of the guys that gets matched up so much, but yet, he's not been able to have any kind of success this year. I mean, and people still put him in those matchups. I mean, I know that in the beginning you're thinking he's going to be probably the winning driver, but now it's almost like he's your go-to guy to win off of now. Am I saying this right? I mean,
right.
Does he
you're exactly right, Jeff. He's a play against. Now, the last few weeks, he's been a little bit better. The opening.
Hey, Jeff, I'm sorry we got to cut you off here. We got to hit a break at the top of the hour. We will pick up that thought with Jeff Quiandro in just a second here on the Racers Odds. Stay with us. Much more to go, and we'll have some more breaking news from around the country and legislatures when it comes to sports gaming.
Do you use the expensive blue or yellow pills to charge your sex life? Are you thinking about it? What if we could promise you the same results for less than $3 a pill? If you're paying $20 a pill for the other pills, you're getting taken to the cleaners. Call On Call Pharmacy right now and save as much as $700. 800-884-7919. On Call Pharmacy delivers the exact same results for less than $3. You'll save more than $16 a pill for the same results. And right now, radio callers will get 44 blue or yellow pills for $120 with free discreet shipping. You can save more than $700 off pharmacy prices. Call On Call Pharmacy now and take advantage of this special offer. 800-884-7919. Charge your sex life now and save a ton of money. Call now and get your 44 pills and save over $700 and qualify for free shipping. Stop overpaying and call right now. 800-884-7919. 800-884-7919. 800-884-7919.
Gone Racing.
There's still wheel to wheel.
The weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more.
Oh, yeah.
Take a ride with us to Victory Lane on Gone Racing.
We just got these lines last night. Was plus 700 on Brad Keselowski. He's already down to plus 550, so I think we know where the money is.
It's going that way.
And that's where my money would have been, too.
Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on VSiN, Channel 204, and Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90.
Great job.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm John Roberts with the Racers Odds, alongside of Championship Crew Chief Jeff Hammond. Our odds-making expert is Jeff Cuyandro, who joins us every week to help put you where the sharp money is. Now, you can catch Racers Odds on a number of different formats and places. NASCAR.com every week will be there. YouTube, VEASAN, PRN, and SiriusXM, and hopefully more to come in the future. Now, Jeff, there was a lot of interesting news coming out of legislatures around the country this past week when it comes to legalized sports betting. Jeff Cuyandro, what exactly happened this week, and what bodes for us in the future?
Well, you know, I think, John, we're seeing states all over the country take steps toward legalization. And one of the states actually is probably the largest NASCAR hotbed of any, and that's North Carolina, where they are petitioning for legalization for sports betting on a couple of Indian reservations. Now, these are, of course, in the early stages, and there are no guarantees. But by the way things have been trending, there is little doubt that other states want to be left out in the cold when it comes to reaping some of the tax benefits of legalized sports wagering.
All right, so that's something definitely to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks, and Jeff will keep us up to date on that as well. We'll have that information for you each week here on the Racers Odds. But now it's time to focus on the Kentucky Speedway. And Jeff Hammond, when you look at this racetrack, it is the last 1.5-mile racetrack before we go into the playoffs. Now, we've always said in the past before, if a driver is going to run for the championship and have a good shot at it, he's going to have to do very well on these 1.5-mile ovals.
Yeah, and I think the best thing about when we talk about Kentucky, it's a very challenging mile and a half. It's not your quote-unquote cookie-cutter mile and a half. Neither are any of them as of late. They've had a lot of changes, little small things have been changed in either in the corners or because of the type of paving, type of tire. But this one at Kentucky is unique unto itself. We keep talking about it. And a lot of drivers will tell you, I'm glad this racetrack is not in the playoffs because it is so challenging. We only come here once a year. And when we get here, as Pat Patterson alluded to, it is hotter than get out right now at that racetrack. So when they start the race, starts cooling down here in about another 30 minutes, it'll be a big challenge for the drivers as well as the crew chiefs to make sure they make the right calls. I said this earlier in our broadcast. When you get to a place like Kentucky, you're only running 400 miles and you're going incredibly fast around this mile and a half track. When you get an opportunity, whether it's a stage break or whether it's a caution flag, you need to get aggressive and make sure you make enough adjustments to your car to keep up with the track cooling down.
So it should come as no surprise to us that some of the favorites at the other racetracks are among the favorites to win tonight. Those, of course, being Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick among the odds-on favorites to win. And we see Brad Keselowski up there as well. Of the 8 times that the NASCAR Cup Series has run at Kentucky, Brad Keselowski has won 3 of those races. Kyle Busch has won 2, and Martin Truex Jr. has a very interesting streak going on at Kentucky, which is highly unlikely that it would continue, but maybe it does. He has won every stage at that racetrack since stage racing was implemented in NASCAR's Top Series. So we also talked about many of the head-to-head matchups. Now it's time for us to dive into the groups. And gentlemen, let's start out with group number 1, and that features again these favorites here. And amongst the favorites, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano, Jeff C. What do you see in this first group?
Well, I think you look at Kyle Busch as the odds-on favorite at plus 175. First of all, that's a low number to beat three other very quality drivers. So that from the get-go already kind of makes me want to shy away. But when you look at his weekend, he has the best numbers in terms of performance going into the race of any of the four drivers.
So Jeff, also just to back up here for just a moment, if I were to throw $10 down on Kyle Busch and he would finish ahead of all those other three drivers, what would that do to that $10?
$10 wager would turn into $17.50 profit plus your initial $10 back from the very friendly wagering window.
And Hammond, that's why he says perhaps that is a long way to go to make some money
Well,
off of Kyle Busch.
I tell you what to me is amazing still in this Group A, want to point out real quick, Martin Truex Jr., 335. I mean, that's pretty incredible. It really is to me.
Yeah.
And like you say, when you look at the numbers overall against the guys he's going up against, it's just like all of a sudden we don't respect you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's what I'm feeling right here. And I'm trying to scratch my head and say, why? It's all because of that practice sessions. Once again, like you pointed out, Jeff, this is what's got everybody scared. I mean, was this number like this earlier in the week?
No, it's absolutely moved, Jeff. And I think you've got to look at this kind of, in a holistic fashion. If you're going to take Kyle Busch at plus 175 and he has to beat Truex, Harvick, and Logano, you might be better off just taking him at plus 350 to win the race, at double the odds.
So also, guys, everybody that we're talking about right now is holding on to their qualifying position. So if you know where these drivers qualify, they are staying there. If I'm not mistaken, Ryan Newman is the only driver that is moving to the back of the pack. And, yeah, that is correct. And he is only giving up the 23rd position. And we do not find Newman until we get down to our last group. So let's move on to Group B, guys. Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Ryan Blaney. Plus 140, Jeff, on Brad Keselowski.
Again, you've got a driver in Brad Keselowski who has a significant starting advantage over the other three drivers in terms of qualifying position. He's been faster in all the practices. He has a much better Kentucky history, but his odds are awfully low. And I think go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we compare it to the first group, though, there seems to be in this group a little bit more of a diversity in drivers and what they've done lately. The first group we looked at, it seemed like those guys are very similar. That they're much closer. When we move on to the second group, to our Group B, it seems like these drivers may be a little bit more diversity when you start talking about Kyle Larson against Brad Keselowski.
Very true. And you'll notice as the groups progress from A through F, the drivers are sort of cooling off as you go down the list. But Brad Keselowski, again, with just, he's been such a staple at Kentucky, very attractive in terms of winning the wager, but at plus $1.40, he's still going to have to probably run in the top 5 to take that bet.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on to our third group here, Group C, and there we find Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, Clint Boyer, and our first group appearance of Jimmy Johnson there. And also this time, Jeff, the numbers are a lot closer.
Yeah, they sure are. I think when you look at all four drivers, each of the drivers has a detractor that kind of makes you, double take. But I think of the four, Jimmy Johnson at plus 275 might have the best balance of any of the drivers, and he might be worth the price here.
Okay, not to challenge you, but I want to ask you a question about that. When I looked at the numbers, I look at Alex Bowman when it comes to mile and a half. So the last 3 races he's run, he's got a first, a seventh, and a second. And Jimmy Johnson can't lay numbers like that up in front of me. So to me, when I'm looking at a number, it might change my mind. Knowing he's driving the same type of vehicle that Jimmy Johnson is, I would have a tendency to think maybe Alex Bowman would be a more enticing, opportunity to go ahead and beat all three of these guys.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Jeff. The one detractor that I had for Bowman is that we have too little data on him at Kentucky. And that's why, for me, he's a detractor in that point. This would probably be a group that overall I would stay away from. But I think if I had to pick any of them, I would go with Johnson. And otherwise, I would like Bowman, but with just not enough data to really support him.
So we had a head-to-head matchup that involved William Byron and Eric Almirola. We know what we felt about that one. But in Group D, our fourth group that we're looking at, we find Eric Almirola once again out of this group, Jeff. Almirola is clearly the highest qualifier, and we find time and time again, this is history. We do not race the stat book. We do not race the history book. But it just seems like at this racetrack, the winner can come from that front row, the either first or second starting position. And there's Almirola in this group at plus 240.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at starting position within this group, certainly Almirola and Kurt Busch separate themselves, with Kurt Busch starting fourth. Then you've got Byron in 12th and Eric Jones in 21st. It's sort of a toss-up group. I think I like Kurt Busch the most. He was sixth best in Happy in both practices, but I think Byron could be sneaky as well. So this might be a very interesting watch and learn.
Hammond, I think in that one, if I had to say something, I think out of the group and perhaps past performance, recent performances, that Kurt Busch may be the most attractive one there, in my opinion.
No, I understand exactly what he's saying there, and it's hard to argue experience right now. But I will, caution everybody when it comes to somebody like William Byron. He seems like he's getting better. His mile and a halves have been pretty respectable, 8th and 9th, the last two races that he's run. And more importantly, he's got some veteran experience when you think about Chad Knaus on top of that box. And we have seen, that sometimes making the right calls during the course of this weekend have paid dividends for some surprise winners. I mean, we think about the truck race. Tyler Ankrum wound up, pulling off a pretty big surprise because of the fact they were able to get, on a fuel mileage race and were able to get the job done. So I look at a guy like Chad Knaus, and he could wind up being a big factor in a night like tonight.
And that was the whole idea of this new rules setup, the new configuration of these race cars, to give the underdog a little bit more of a shot and to keep these drivers in the competition a little bit closer on the same level playing field. So let's move on. Now Group E has Austin Dillon plus 425, Daniel Suarez minus 120, Stenhouse, Ryan Newman here. We got Newman going to the pack, but if you take just qualifying, Jeff, it seems like these numbers are somewhat reflected by starting position.
Yeah, they certainly are, John. Obviously the number here that's just glaring is Suarez at minus $1.20. Yes, he's starting on the pole, but to lay a price and he has to consequently beat three other drivers, no thank you.
Yeah, stay away from that one, I would say. Hammond, what do you think? That sums that one
No,
up.
don't want to do that. Don't want to do that.
Okay,
These numbers make me real nervous.
Yeah, Group F, our final group, and maybe the drivers here that we don't know too much about. We know some of the veterans in McDowell and David Reagan, been around for a long time, and we know what they tend to do week in and week out. Ryan Preece can always be surprising. Now, Ty Dillon is coming off a career-best finish, but that, of course, once again, is you just have to quantify that a little bit, saying that it is, Jeff, Daytona is what he's coming off of.
Yeah, he sure is. John, one of the strongest tools that a bettor has at their disposal is to simply decide to bypass a wager. And I think this is a shining example of that. You've got four drivers who have been rather inconsistent at Kentucky. You really don't know much about what you're getting into. By and large, they're starting deeper in the field. This is just simply one that I don't want any part of.
Hammond, you want any part of this?
Well, no, I'm like him, and I think if you'll notice what Jeff C's been saying last week, it was really kind of like stay away from head-to-head matchups. And I think he was a little more favorable some of the group situations, but this week it's almost like totally reversed. It's there's some reasonable head-to-head matchups, but a lot of these groups, I mean, they just don't make good sense.
Yeah.
They really don't. When you start looking at it, what he's talking about, and it's this racetrack. I mean, there's not a lot of data when you think about it. Okay, yeah, we've run 8 races here, but each time we've come back, there's always been some variables that, not to say the night's not any different, but these variables have not been very consistent to be able to sit down and basically plot out a trend. And I think tonight's going to wind up being the same way. So I think I hear where he's coming from. Am I saying that right, Jeff?
I think you're exactly right, Jeff. Last week we look at where long shots abound can win. We're back to a more traditional week this week, and I think we have to handicap that way. We have to be, we have to scrutinize our matchups very closely, and defeating three other drivers is really difficult, no matter how good you are. So by and large, the groups are bets that I would probably stay off of for the most part this week.
Well, when we come back, we're going to wrap up some of the wagers that we have looked at that look to be fairly enticing tonight at Kentucky. We're also going to try to put our collective money where our mouths are and see what we think is one of the best wagers on the board as of right now. We'll be back with much more Racers Odds in just a moment. Stay with us.
The IRS is the most feared agency in the world. You've heard ads from other companies offering to help taxpayers only if they owe over $10,000. Here at Platinum Tax Defenders, we're A-plus rated with the Better Business Bureau, and we're proud to be one of the only tax firms in the country who understands that people who owe less than $10,000 need help just as badly. The IRS doesn't care how much money you owe. They'll still garnish your wages and even seize your assets. So whether you owe just a few $1,000s or hundreds of thousands, call now for your free tax consultation. If you qualify, we may even be able to reduce your tax debt down to a small fraction of what you owe. So don't wait until the IRS seizes your property and garnishes your wages. Call 800-856-1330 and get your tax problem resolved once and for all. That number again is 800-856-1330. 800-856-1330.
Before the pros tee off for this week's golf tournament, the VSiN experts help you make the cut on long shots.
When I profiled all the players for this tournament, I said Schauffele's number one on my board. I like the odds, 25-1. Let's go ahead and play X.
Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds are your weekly betting caddies and help you cash those tickets.
Don't be afraid to maybe take some longer odd guys.
Don't miss long shots, Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern on VSiN, the only golf betting show you need, exclusively on Sirius XM Channel 204.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
We're back with more Racers Odds.
And welcome back, everybody. We are almost out of time on this edition of Racers Odds. Time flies when you're having fun, but we're counting down to the green flag at the Kentucky Speedway tonight. It is hot. It is not going to be so slick because of the track grip compound that has been put down there, but there's a lot of hot bets out there as well. One thing, Hammond, we've looked at throughout this season, it's been kind of a mystery, maybe it really even dating back 2 seasons now, is not only has Kyle Larson failed to win so far this in quite a while, he's in a long winless streak right now. They're struggling at certain places, but yet we keep seeing him pop up in terms of matchups and groups and not too far off when it comes for individual odds to win.
Yeah, and I was getting with Jeff C. before we had to go to the 7 o'clock break, and Jeff, you and I were talking about it. When you look at his head-to-head matchup record, it's pretty abysmal. I mean, it really is. I mean, it really has. He's not had a very good year at the betting side of it, no matter as far as going to victory lane. So, how do you really explain how he keeps getting these certain matchups that seem like make him a loser?
Well, it's a great question, Jeff. With most of the matchups, as the bookmaker plans them out week to week, a lot of these matchups revert to prior success at a given track. Now, even though Kyle Larson, has not been stellar in the last couple years, he does have a history of running well at many tracks and even winning at several different tracks. So when they go back and they look at recent performance at a given track, they see Kyle Larson with good performances, and that's why he is consistently in the drivers that are matched up against one another.
So if we go back to just the plain odds for an individual driver to win the race, of course, Kyle Busch is going to lead the way at plus 350. But there is Kyle Larson again at 14 to 1. Again, guys, with what you just said, Jeff, is that surprising, a 14 to 1 bet for Kyle Larson? Do you think those odds are about right on?
I think they are about right on, and I think that's what you get when you cross recent history, a good history at Kentucky, with current performance. You get numbers like 14 to 1.
Is there a value there, Jeff, in the odds to win for you? Is there one of those guys that's standing out right now that may be a real value?
I think if I were going to look up top, I think I would bypass Harvick and Kyle Busch. I think I would look more towards Truex and Keselowski at 7 to 1 and probably go with one of them. If I were going to go deeper, it would probably land on Eric Almirola or Kurt Busch at 18 to 1 or 20 to 1 respectively.
Hammond, anybody you like in odds to win?
Yeah, I'm kind of like what he's saying, what Jeff's saying. I like Martin Truex, 7 to 1, but I also, I'm feeling a little bit. I'm still feeling friendly with Jimmy Johnson right now. I feel like he may be able to sneak one in. Racetrack where he hasn't won it before, but at 25 to 1, if I had to put a little bit of money on just where he's been kind of trending recently, I might decide to do that.
Yep, and that would be a good payoff if you were to be able to do that. Jeff C., let's start with you and going back into the head-to-head matchups. Is there one that's in particular that's enticing to you, or are those pretty iffy this week in terms of who's against whom?
Now, I think when I look at the head-to-head matchups, the one that stands out is Kurt Busch at minus 110 over Clint Bowyer at minus 110. I just like Busch's recent performance, his performances at Kentucky, and I dislike what Clint Bowyer's done recently. So that would be the matchup that I would probably put my money on.
I'm still going about the same way with this one different driver, Jimmy Johnson versus Clint Bowyer, all because the numbers are bearing out what Jeff is saying about that other head-to-head matchup. It looks like Clint's trending down while Jimmy Johnson's trending up. I like his chances tonight.
Okay, so Jeff, now Jeff C., we're now going to go with you and your bet of the week out of the whole group. Individuals, groups, head-to-head matchups. What do you like the best?
Well, it's hard to say, but I think I would go back, like Jeff was saying, and take a look at Kurt Busch over Clint Bowyer. But I'd like to just throw this out there. And so much of wagering has to do with betting structure. If you were backing, let's say, Brad Keselowski this week, would you prefer him at plus 140 head-to-head over Kyle Busch? Or would you prefer him at plus 140 to win Group B over Elliott, Larson, and Blaney? These are the kind of things you have to decide as a wager and handicapper. And I'd like to know at least your feelings on that.
Well, I agree with you that sometimes you do have to, and as we get to my pick of the week, sometimes you do have to bet with your head instead of your heart. What you said, Jeff, there made good sense. Now, I know when it comes to individual drivers that it's not sometimes the best, the sharp money is not exactly there that we find in the head-to-head matchups. This is one that's a little bit more with the heart than with the head, but also with a little bit of statistical backup. It seems like more often than not, the winner at Kentucky comes from the top two starting positions. Here, Daniel Suarez is on the pole. He's about as hungry as he can. His teammates at Stewart-Haas Racing have qualified well and run well so far this weekend, in my opinion. So I'm hoping this comes true. It may not be the wisest bet when it comes to value, but I just have a little bit of a gut feeling about this one. And sometimes, Jeff, it's not too bad to bet your gut, is it?
No, without question. You have an analytical backup there with him starting first. So there's definitely cause. You wouldn't see normally a driver starting on the pole at Kentucky with odds as tall as 18 to 1. So I think it's probably a very sound bet, Jeff.
So at the beginning of any season, we start talking about how it's never too early to talk about the playoffs, the postseason, and the championship. As soon as somebody wins the Daytona 500, somebody will say right away, hey, not only did we win the Daytona 500, but we're also locked into the playoffs with that victory. With 8 races to go, there is a hunger factor out there, guys. There is a desperation factor out there. And so many crew chiefs this past week, we heard say in different walks that they don't care about points right now. They don't care about stage points. They don't care about stage racing. All they are focused on is simply winning the race. And that could be where some sharp money might be, where some value might be in that hunger factor.
No, it really is. I mean, it's, as I said earlier, when you start thinking about where you are and you start looking at your position, are you in? Or how much are you in? If you got a race that you could give away and still be in, that's always very important when you decide to make a basically strategic move to try to either steal a race or get an advantage over a fellow competitor. And also how fast your race car is on that particular given night. Is it worth going and risking what you're trying to pull off, whether it's win the race, win a stage? I'll have to factor every bit of it in. If you're on the outside looking in, then you've got to put yourself in that position to either win a stage or to win the race. Then you start gambling from the drop of the green flag. So everything has to be, I think, put in the computer, dissected, analyzed, and at the same time, then look at your gut and say, hey, that's exactly what I need to do because my gut's telling me, along with what my computer's telling me, that we got to do it this way, and you got to convince your driver.
From a betting perspective, though, is the hunger factor, Jeff, is it all something that should come into this, or is that something you should stay away from because it is such a variable?
No, I think you have to take it under consideration. As a driver becomes more desperate to only get a win, his value increases on odds to win a race, but his value consequently decreases to win a matchup. So you've got to really, like we said earlier, you almost have to play a psychology game and really get into the head of the driver and team to figure out where you should best place them.
Because there is pressure in this sport. There is a tremendous amount of pressure. We did hear earlier this week that Paul Menard, he knows he's driving his car next year. He'll be back. He says he has a contract, but there's some other drivers right now who aren't signed, and the best way they can see that they will be signed and they will be a valuable commodity to stay in that very elite group of the only 40 drivers that get to compete in this series. Hammond, you see thousands of guys year in and year out playing on professional baseball fields, professional football fields. There's only 40 that get to race in NASCAR's top series. There is a tremendous amount of pressure on these guys to hold on to their rides, and making the playoffs takes it off.
Well, no, it does help to take the pressure off, but at the same time, it's not always a guarantee because you can't let somebody put your back against the wall, and that's how they get results out of you. You need somebody that can go out there each and every week, and you start looking at these elite drivers, like Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick. I mean, we find them at the top of the hill each and every week for a reason. And a lot of these drivers right now that you look back through there that have got, big numbers beside their names and zeros by their win column, there's a reason for that also. If you make it to the top 40 and get a chance to race in NASCAR, you've made it to a certain degree. It's how far can you make it go further? What is it going to take to get you to be able to find that little bit of extra that makes you a winner like Joey Logano and a champion like Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski and Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex Jr.? What does it take to make you into the next Jimmy Johnson? That's what you need to find, and that's where the difference really comes into play, not only tonight at Kentucky, but for the remaining of the part of the year. Can you figure out a way to make things better and get yourself where you are sought after instead of being one of the guys that's looking for somebody to let them have a chance?
So there are 3 areas we normally look at, Jeff Quiandro, when we look at every week. We look at the driver odds to win the race. We look at the matchups head-to-head and the group. So just recapping, you normally find your best value and your best bets. Do you feel like the place that you really should be focusing is in these head-to-head matchups?
Yeah, without question. If you're in this to try to make a profit, it's where the takeout by the sports book is the lowest. So that's ultimately where you want to head. And the numbers that get higher and higher with groups and then, of course, drivers to win the race are very attractive and oftentimes do have value. But I find on a week-over-week basis for well over 20 years, that driver matchups are definitely the way to go in terms of trying to acquire a profit.
And also, it just seems like some of the drivers that are involved in these head-to-head matchups, some fare better than others.
Yes, absolutely. And we see that, sort of progress throughout the year. But it's been my experience that if a driver starts off very hot or very cold, they don't always turn that around. As a matter of fact, I would say it's the exception when those records get flipped, 2/3 or 3/4 through the season.
So, Jeff Coyandro, I want to thank you once again for the insight. Jeff Hammond, thank you for the analysis as well as we tried to take you through this field and tell you where the sharp money is. We want to thank everyone on NASCAR.com for joining us. Of course, you can catch Racers Odds on the VEASAN Network, PRN Network. The Betcast is also available on Sirius XM, YouTube as well. So there are many different platforms on which you can catch us every week, and we will be here with you every race day to tell you where the sharp money is. So long, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
This has been Racers Odds, a presentation of PRN, the Performance Racing Network.